They called her the last chance bride, mocking the woman who chose a wanderer with empty pockets, worn boots, and no future. They laughed as she walked down a dusty village road with nothing but a battered suitcase and the hand of a gentle drifter no one valued. But the man they dismissed as a beggar carried a crown in his blood. He was the Alpha King in exile. And when he rose to reclaim his throne, he returned not with vengeance, but with the woman who loved him when he had nothing, raising her beside him as his Luna before the very villagers who once belittled her. That day, every cruel tongue that mocked her learned how to bow. Welcome back to my channel, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The village of Thornhollow had many traditions, but kindness had never been one of them. Perched on the edge of a moss-dark forest where wolves howled at moonrise and mist clung to cobblestones like cold fingers, it was a place where everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew their place. The blacksmith's daughter would marry the merchant's son. The baker's boy would inherit his father's ovens. The world turned in predictable circles, like a water wheel that never stopped grinding. Except for Eva. Eva had always been different. Too soft-spoken for the village women who spoke in shouts and curses. Too thoughtful for the men who believed a woman's value depended on how much bread she could bake or how quietly she could keep her opinions. And worst of all, she was nearing an age that the villagers whispered was dangerously close to unmarriageable. 26 winters. Practically ancient, according to Aunt Meredith, who announced it at the well every morning as if reading funeral rites. Poor Eva, Meredith would sigh, loud enough for half the square to hear. All that beauty wasted on stubbornness. She'll end up alone, mark my words. A woman can't be so particular and expect to eat. Eva had learned long ago not to respond. Words wouldn't change their minds. In Thornhollow, a woman's worth was measured in dowries and obedience, and Eva had neither to offer. Her father had died when she was 12, leaving behind debts instead of silver. Her mother followed him 3 winters later, worn down by hunger and shame. Now Eva lived with her brother's family, a charity case who scrubbed floors and kept her eyes down. To them, her gentle heart was a flaw. To Eva, it was all she had left. That was when the wanderer arrived. He came at dawn, when the mist still clung to the forest edge and the village stirred awake with the reluctant groans of roosters and cart wheels. Eva had been drawing water from the well when she saw him, tall, golden-haired, moving through the fog like something out of an old song. His clothes were simple, weather-worn linen and leather, the kind that spoke of long roads and longer nights. He carried no weapon, no coin purse jangling at his belt, no proof of lineage or title. Just a quiet strength in the way he stood, and a softness in the way he looked at her. "Morning," he said, his voice low and warm, like honey poured over gravel. Eva blinked, startled. Men didn't greet her. Not kindly anyway. "Morning," she managed, gripping the bucket tighter. He smiled, a small, knowing curve of his lips, as if he found her wariness both understandable and unnecessary. "I'm Robert. Just passing through. Could you point me toward the inn?" "There's no inn," Eva said quickly. "But the tavern lets rooms. Down the main road, 3rd door on the left. The one with the crooked sign." "Crooked sign," Robert repeated, amusement flickering in his gray eyes. "That narrows it down." Eva felt her cheeks warm. "It's the only sign that's crooked. You'll see." "I'm sure I will." He inclined his head, a gesture too graceful for a drifter, and turned to leave. But then he paused. "What's your name?" She hesitated. Strangers didn't ask her name. Strangers barely looked at her. "Eva. Eva." He said it like he was tasting the word, rolling it over his tongue. "Thank you, Eva." And then he walked away, leaving her standing there with a bucket of water and a heart that beat just a little too fast. By midday, the village had branded him. A stray dog with good hair, one woman snorted at the market, elbowing her friend. "A useless drifter," laughed another, louder this time, as if hoping he'd hear. "My daughter would trip over herself before settling for that," Gregor the tanner announced, gesturing toward Robert where he sat outside the tavern, whittling a piece of wood with a knife that looked older than the village itself. But Robert never snapped back. Never flinched. He simply smiled, that same small, knowing smile, as though he found the villagers' opinions mildly entertaining, like watching ducks argue about the meaning of rain. Eva watched from across the square, pretending to examine apples at the fruit cart. She should have ignored him. That's what her family reminded her every morning, noon, and night for the next 3 weeks as Robert stayed in Thornhollow, taking odd jobs, mending fences, chopping wood for widows who couldn't afford to pay him. Stay away from that beggar, her brother Osric warned, jabbing a finger at her chest. He's trouble. I can smell it. He's done nothing wrong, Eva said quietly. Yet, Osric snapped. Men like that don't stay in one place unless they're running from something. Her sister-in-law, Greta, was less subtle. You're not getting any younger, Eva. If you keep mooning over strays, you'll die alone. But Eva couldn't help it, because Robert kept finding her. At the well, where he'd paused to ask how her day had been, as if her answer actually mattered. At the market, where he'd carry her basket without being asked, his fingers brushing hers when he handed it back. At the forest edge, where she gathered herbs for the healer, and he'd appear as if summoned by fate, walking her home as though her safety was sacred. And he listened. He listened when she talked about the stars, about the old stories her father used to tell. He listened when she admitted she felt invisible in her own village, like a ghost haunting a life that didn't belong to her. He listened when she cried, and he didn't tell her to stop. He just held her hand. And that was when Eva's heart betrayed her. I want to marry you. Robert said it quietly, standing outside her brother's house on a gray evening when the wind smelled of rain. His hands were gentle around hers, calloused and warm, and his gray eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. You don't even know me, Eva whispered, trembling. I know you're kind when the world isn't. I know you see people, really see them, when everyone else looks through them. I know that when you laugh, it sounds like the first day of spring. His thumb traced slow circles on her wrist, and she shivered. I know enough. I have nothing to offer you, she said, voice breaking. No dowry. No family name. Nothing. Robert's smile was soft, heartbreaking. You're offering me everything. And before she could answer, before she could think, her brother's voice exploded from the doorway. Marry him. Osric's laughter was so loud, so sharp, that neighbors peeked out of windows like vultures smelling carrion. You'll starve, her sister-in-law shrieked, appearing behind him. Her Aunt Meredith clutched her chest as if Eva's choice had personally offended the ancestors. And when Eva stood there the next morning, battered suitcase in hand, choosing Robert anyway, the whole village gathered. They pointed. They laughed. They whispered she'd settled for scraps, that she was desperate, that she'd crawled so low even beggars looked like princes. Eva cried openly, trembling at the sound of their ridicule echoing off the ancient stone walls. But Robert held her hand tighter. He didn't glare at the villagers, though he easily could have. He simply stood tall beside her, jaw set, eyes steady, not with shame, but with a quiet, dangerous certainty, as if he saw not who they were now, but who they would beg before later. And then he led her away. Down the dirt road. Into the mist. Into a future the village would never forget. The first night away from Thornhollow, they slept in a shepherd's abandoned hut at the forest edge. Eva sat on the single wooden bench, clutching her suitcase like a shield, watching Robert build a fire with practiced efficiency. The flames caught quickly, throwing golden light across his face, and she realized with a jolt that she'd married a stranger. A stranger whose hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd built 1,000 fires. A stranger who looked at her like she was something precious. A stranger who smelled of pine and rain and something else, something wild she couldn't name. You're afraid of me, Robert said quietly, not looking up from the fire. Eva's breath caught. No. I'm afraid of this. He gestured between them. Of what you've chosen. She didn't deny it. Robert set down the stick he'd been using to prod the flames and turned to face her fully. In the firelight, his eyes looked almost silver, like moonlight on water. I won't touch you until you're ready. You have my word. That's not, Eva swallowed hard. That's not what I'm afraid of. Then what? That I made a mistake. That they were right. That you'll wake up one morning and realize you could have done better than a penniless girl with nothing to her name. Robert was silent for a long moment. Then he crossed the small space between them and knelt before her so they were eye to eye. His hands rested on his knees, carefully not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Do you know what I saw the first time I looked at you? He asked. Eva shook her head. Someone who'd been taught she was invisible. Someone so used to being overlooked that she learned to disappear even when she was standing right there. His voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. And I thought, here's someone who sees the world clearly, who hasn't let cruelty make her cruel. Here's someone worth knowing. Tears pricked at Eva's eyes. You barely know me. Then let me. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was featherlight, reverent. Let me spend every day learning you. Your favorite season. The way you hum when you think no one's listening. Why you stop to talk to stray cats. Everything. Eva's breath shuddered out of her. Where are we going? North. To the capital. Why there? Robert's expression flickered, something dark and complicated crossing his face before smoothing out again. I have business there. People I need to see. What kind of business? The kind that will ensure you never go hungry again. He said it with such quiet certainty that Eva almost believed him. Almost. Robert. Sleep, he said gently, rising to his feet. I'll keep watch. You don't have to. I want to. He settled against the far wall, putting deliberate distance between them. Besides, I'm used to it. Eva wanted to ask what he meant. Wanted to ask why a wanderer spoke like someone educated, moved like someone trained, carried himself like someone who'd never begged for anything in his life. But exhaustion pulled at her bones, and the fire was warm, and Robert's presence felt strangely safe despite everything. So she lay down on the bench, using her suitcase as a pillow, and fell into uneasy dreams of crowns and wolves and laughter that echoed like thunder. They traveled north for 5 days. Through forests where the trees grew so thick the sunlight barely touched the ground. Past villages smaller than Thorn Hollow, where people watched them with wary eyes and said nothing. Along rivers that sang with cold, clear water, where Robert would catch fish with his bare hands, a feat that should have been impossible, but somehow wasn't. And every day, Eva learned something new about her husband. He never slept more than a few hours. He could identify any plant by sight and smell. He moved through the wilderness like he'd been born to it, finding paths where Eva saw only brambles. And he was always watching not just the forest around them, but the horizon, as if expecting something. Or someone. You're running from something, Eva said on the 3rd day, watching him scout ahead while she rested against a fallen log. Robert paused mid-step, his back to her. What makes you say that? The way you never fully relax. The way you check behind us every hour. The way you tense whenever we pass other travelers. She kept her voice gentle, non-accusing. I'm not blind, Robert. He turned slowly, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. Vulnerable. If I told you, he said carefully, you'd think I was mad. Try me. Robert studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something heavy in his mind. Then he crossed back to her and sat on the log beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I'm not running from something, he said quietly. I'm running toward it. Toward the life I should have had. The life that was stolen from me. By who? People I trusted. His jaw tightened. People who wanted what I had and were willing to kill for it. Eva's heart clenched. So you're in danger. I was. He met her eyes. But I'm not anymore. Or I won't be, once we reach the capital. Because of this business you mentioned? Something like that. He reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. His fingers were rough, scarred, but the way he held her was achingly gentle. I know I'm asking you to trust me without giving you all the answers. That's not fair to you. No, Eva agreed. It's not. But I will tell you everything. Soon. He exhaled shakily. I need to be sure first. That it's safe. That I'm not putting you in danger by telling you the truth. Eva looked down at their joined hands, at the way his thumb traced absent patterns on her skin, like he couldn't help touching her now that he'd started. I chose you, she said softly. Not because I knew everything about you, but because I knew enough. That hasn't changed. Robert's expression cracked, just for a moment, and she saw something raw and grateful beneath the careful control. You terrify me, he whispered. I terrify you? Because I didn't expect you. He lifted their joined hands, pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. I didn't expect to feel this much. Eva's breath caught. Feel what? But Robert just shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. Ask me again in the capital. That's not fair. I know. His smile widened. But you married me anyway. And despite everything, the uncertainty, the secrets, the impossible situation she'd stumbled into, Eva laughed. They reached the capital on the 6th day. Eva had never seen anything like it. Thorn Hollow could have fit inside the main square 10 times over. Buildings rose 3, 4, even 5 stories high, their stone facades carved with intricate designs. Banners hung from every window, bearing a symbol Eva didn't recognize, a wolf's head crowned in silver. The streets teemed with people, merchants hawking wares, children darting between carts, guards in black armor patrolling with expressions that suggested they'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. And above it all, looming over the city like a sleeping giant, stood the castle. It was massive, ancient, beautiful and terrible all at once, with towers that pierced the clouds and walls that looked like they'd been carved from the mountain itself. This way, Robert said, his hand firm on the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd. Eva tried not to stare, tried to look like she belonged here, like she hadn't spent her entire life in a village where the biggest building was a 2-story tavern. But then Robert turned down a side street, then another, leading her away from the crowds and into quieter neighborhoods where the buildings grew larger and the people better dressed. Where are we going? Eva asked, nerves fluttering in her stomach. Somewhere safe, Robert said. Somewhere I should have brought you days ago. They stopped before a massive house, no, a manor, with iron gates and manicured gardens. Robert approached the gate like he owned it, and before Eva could ask what he was doing, a man in fine livery emerged from the guardhouse. The man's eyes widened. My lord. Inside, Robert said curtly. Now. And tell no one you've seen me. The man bowed, actually bowed, and opened the gate. Eva's mind spun. My lord? Robert led her up the stone path, through doors that opened at his approach as if by magic, into an entrance hall that could have swallowed her brother's entire house. Servants appeared from nowhere, all of them freezing when they saw Robert. Several gasped. One woman covered her mouth, eyes bright with tears. My lord, an older man in dark robes breathed, stepping forward. Everyone thought. I know what everyone thought, Robert said. His voice had changed. Not louder, but harder, carrying an authority that made Eva's spine straighten instinctively. Gather the inner circle. Tell them I've returned. Tell them it's time. The man bowed deeply. At once, my lord. He disappeared down a corridor, taking several servants with him. Eva stood frozen in the middle of the hall, her heart pounding, her mind racing with impossible conclusions. Robert turned to her slowly. Gone was the gentle wanderer who'd built fires and caught fish and held her hand like she was made of glass. In his place stood someone else entirely. Someone who looked at home in this palace. Someone who moved like he'd been born to command. Someone who, Eva realized with dawning horror and wonder, had been playing a part in Thornhollow. You're not a wanderer, she whispered. No, Robert agreed. You're not poor. No. Then who? Her voice cracked. Who are you? Robert took a step toward her, and even that movement was different now, more measured, more deliberate, like a predator that had stopped pretending to be prey. My name is Robert Ashenfang, he said quietly. And I'm the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. Or I was, before my own court tried to kill me. The world tilted. Eva's vision swam. And the last thing she saw before her knees gave out was Robert lunging forward, catching her before she hit the floor, his expression twisted with something that looked like regret. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair as darkness pulled her under. I'm so sorry, Eva. But I need you to trust me just a little bit longer. Eva woke to silk. Not the rough wool blankets she'd known her entire life, not the threadbare quilts her mother had patched 100 times, but silk. Soft as water, cool against her skin, the kind of fabric she'd only ever seen on merchant carts passing through Thornhollow. She sat up slowly, head spinning, and took in her surroundings. The room was enormous. Easily 5 times the size of the bedroom she'd shared with her sister-in-law's children. A fireplace large enough to stand and crackled with fresh logs. Tapestries depicting wolves and forests and silver moons hung from walls made of pale stone. The bed she lay in was carved from dark wood, its posts reaching toward a ceiling painted with stars. And sitting in a chair beside the bed, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands, was Robert. No, not Robert the Wanderer. Robert Ashenfang, the Alpha King. Her husband. He looked up the moment she stirred, and the relief that flooded his face was so raw it made her chest ache. You're awake. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been shouting. Or crying. Thank the gods, you're awake. Eva stared at him. At this stranger wearing her husband's face. How long was I unconscious? 3 hours. Robert rose, started to move toward her, then stopped himself. The physician said it was shock. That you'd wake when your body was ready. 3 hours, Eva repeated numbly. She looked down at herself and realized someone had changed her clothes. The worn orange dress she'd traveled in was gone, replaced by a nightgown of pale blue linen that probably cost more than everything she'd owned in her entire life. My handmaiden dressed you, Robert said quickly, reading her thoughts. I wouldn't. Who are you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Robert exhaled slowly and sank back into the chair, as if his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. You know who I am. I know what you told me. That you're a king. That your court tried to kill you. But I don't, her voice cracked. I don't understand any of this. Why were you in Thornhollow? Why did you? She couldn't finish. Couldn't ask why he'd married her, because suddenly she was terrified of the answer. 5 years ago, Robert began, his voice low and measured. My father died. The kingship passed to me as it should have. I was 24. Young, but not unprepared. My father had trained me my entire life to rule. He paused, rubbing a hand over his face. But there were those in my court who believed I was too young. Too soft. They wanted someone harder. Someone who would rule with an iron fist instead of mercy. His jaw tightened. My uncle, Aldrich, led the faction. He convinced half the council that I was unfit. And when words didn't work, he tried assassination. Eva's breath caught. It failed, Robert continued. Barely. My personal guard died protecting me. 7 good men, dead because I trusted the wrong people. His hands clenched into fists. I couldn't stay in the capital. Couldn't trust anyone. So I left. Went into hiding. Became no one. And Thornhollow? Was the last place anyone would look for a king. He finally met her eyes. Small. Remote. Full of people too busy gossiping to notice anything real. The words should have stung, but they didn't. Because he was right. But why stay? Eva asked. Why not just pass through? Something shifted in Robert's expression. Something vulnerable. Because I saw you. Eva's heart stumbled. I was supposed to stay one night. Buy supplies and leave. But then I saw you at the well, and you looked at me like I was just a man. Not a threat. Not a target. Not a title. Just a man. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again. Do you know how rare that is? To be seen as yourself and nothing more. So you stayed because I didn't know who you were? Eva's voice came out sharper than she intended. Because I was naive enough to think you were just a wanderer? No. Robert's voice was firm. I stayed because you were kind when you didn't have to be. Because you talked to me like I mattered even though everyone told you I didn't. Because when I listened to you talk about the stars, I remembered why I wanted to be king in the first place, not for power, but to protect people like you. People like me, Eva repeated flatly. You mean peasants? I mean good people. Robert stood abruptly, frustration flashing across his face. People who've been beaten down by life and cruelty, but still choose gentleness. People who see the world clearly and don't let it make them cruel. He crossed to the window, staring out at something Eva couldn't see. I could have stayed hidden forever, he said quietly. Part of me wanted to. It was easier being no one. Safer. But then I fell in love with you, and I realized hiding wasn't living. It was just another kind of death. Eva's breath stopped. You what? Robert turned from the window, and the look on his face destroyed her. I love you, he said simply. I think I loved you from the moment you directed me to the crooked sign and blushed like you'd revealed some great secret. I definitely loved you when you defended me to your family even though they mocked you for it. And I knew I'd spend the rest of my life loving you when you chose me over everything you'd ever known. Tears burned in Eva's eyes. You lied to me. I did. You let me believe you were poor. Helpless. That I was saving you by choosing you. You were saving me, Robert said fiercely. Just not the way you thought. Not with charity or pity or sacrifice. You saved me by being exactly who you are. By reminding me that there are still people worth fighting for. I don't. Eva pressed her palms to her eyes. I don't know what you want from me. Nothing. Robert's voice cracked. I want nothing from you except what you're willing to give. If you want to leave, I'll have you escorted anywhere you want to go. With enough gold to live comfortably for the rest of your life. No strings. No obligations. I swear it. Eva lowered her hands slowly. And if I stay? Robert went very still. Then I reclaim my throne, he said quietly. And I make you my Luna. My queen. My equal in all things. I don't know how to be a queen. Neither did I know how to be a king when my father died. Robert took a tentative step toward her. We'll learn together. The court that tried to kill you will be dealt with. His voice went cold. I've spent 5 years gathering evidence, building alliances, waiting for the right moment. That moment is now. Eva looked at him, really looked at him, and saw both versions at once. The gentle wanderer who'd held her hand and caught fish and built fires. And the Alpha King who commanded servants with a word and moved like violence waiting to happen. Both were real. Both were him. I'm angry, she said finally. You have every right to be. I'm confused. I know. And I'm terrified. Robert's expression softened. Of me? Of this. She gestured at the opulent room, the silk sheets, the tapestries. I'm a village girl who scrubbed floors for her keep. I don't belong in a palace. You belong wherever you choose to be. That's easy for you to say. You were born to this. I was, Robert agreed. And I've seen what it does to people. How it twists them, makes them cruel and paranoid and hungry for more. He moved closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wounded animal. But you? You've lived with nothing and it made you generous. You've been treated like you didn't matter and it made you kind. That's worth more than any crown. He stopped at the edge of the bed, close enough to touch but not touching. I'm not asking you to decide right now, he said softly. I'm not asking you to forgive me or trust me or even like me anymore. I'm just asking you to stay. For a few days. Let me show you what this life could be. And then, if you still want to leave, I'll let you go. Eva studied his face, the earnest gray eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. One condition, she said. Anything. No more lies. Even if the truth is difficult. Even if you think it'll hurt me. No more secrets. Robert's throat worked. No more secrets. Promise me. I promise. He held out his hand, palm up, an offering. On my life and crown and whatever remains of my honor, no more secrets. Eva looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, gentle but firm, and she felt the tension drain from his body. Thank you, he whispered. I haven't forgiven you yet. I know. And I might still leave. I know that too. But I'll stay. For now. Robert lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that lingered just a fraction too long. That's more than I deserve. The next morning, Eva woke alone. For a moment, panic seized her. Had it all been a dream? Was she back in Thornhollow? Back in her brother's house? Back to scrubbing floors and swallowing mockery? Then she saw the note on the pillow beside her, written in elegant script. Morning meeting with the council. Didn't want to wake you. Breakfast will arrive shortly. The wardrobe is yours. Take whatever you like. I'll come find you when I'm done. R. Eva read it 3 times, tracing the letters with her fingertip. Even his handwriting looked regal. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. My lady? May I enter? Yes. The door opened, revealing a woman perhaps 10 years older than Eva, dressed in simple but well-made clothing. She carried a tray laden with more food than Eva usually ate in a week. Good morning, my lady. I'm Marta, your handmaiden. She set the tray on a small table by the window and curtsied. His Majesty asked me to assist you with anything you might need. His Majesty, Eva repeated faintly. It sounded absurd. You mean Robert? Marta's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Amusement, maybe. Yes, my lady. Though in public, it's probably best to use his title. Right. Of course. Eva climbed out of bed, acutely aware of how out of place she looked in this beautiful room. I don't really know how this works. You'll learn, Marta said kindly. We all had to once. She crossed to the massive wardrobe and pulled open the doors, revealing more dresses than Eva had seen in her entire life. Rich colors, fine fabrics, intricate embroidery. Where did these come from? Eva asked, running her fingers over a deep green velvet. His Majesty had them commissioned years ago. For his future Luna. Marta pulled out a dress of soft gray wool with silver threading. This one, I think. Simple but elegant. Perfect for a first day. Years ago, Eva echoed. But he didn't even know me years ago. No, Marta agreed, helping Eva into the dress with practiced efficiency. But he always believed he'd find someone worth wearing them. The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Eva caught sight of herself in the looking glass and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked regal, put together. Nothing like the scrub woman from Thornhollow. Come, Marta said gently. Eat. You'll need your strength for today. Why? What's today? Marta's smile was enigmatic. Today, my lady, the court learns that their king has returned. And that he's brought home a queen. The great hall was designed to intimidate. Eva understood that the moment Marta led her through the massive oak doors. Everything about it screamed power. The vaulted ceiling that seemed to touch the sky, the stone columns carved with wolves mid-hunt, the throne at the far end that sat on a dais 5 steps high. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the floor in blood red and gold. And standing throughout the hall, watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain, were the nobles of the northern court. Eva's steps faltered. Steady, Marta whispered beside her. You belong here as much as any of them. That was objectively untrue, but Eva appreciated the lie. The nobles parted as she walked through, their whispers following her like autumn leaves. That's her. The village girl? She doesn't even walk properly. I heard she comes from nothing. Literally nothing. Eva kept her chin up, her hands clasped in front of her, trying to remember every scrap of dignity her mother had taught her. You might be poor, her mother used to say, but you're not small. Never make yourself small. At the far end of the hall, Robert stood beside his throne. Not sitting on it. Standing beside it, as if he hadn't yet claimed what was his. He wore black and silver, formal clothes that made him look every inch the king he was, but his eyes never left Eva. And as she drew closer, she saw the worry etched into his face, the tension in his shoulders. He thought she might run. Part of her wanted to. But instead, she climbed the 5 steps to the dais, stood beside him, and met his gaze. Relief flooded his expression. You came. I said I would stay, she murmured. I keep my promises. The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Then he turned to face the assembled court, and his voice rang out with an authority that made Eva's spine straighten instinctively. 5 years ago, this court was torn apart by betrayal. Good men died. Trust was shattered. And I was forced to flee my own home to survive. His gaze swept over the nobles, cold and assessing. Today, that ends. Silence fell like a hammer. Some of you remained loyal in my absence, Robert continued. You risked your lives gathering evidence, building alliances, waiting for my return. To you, I give my gratitude and my trust." His expression hardened. "Others conspired with my uncle. You believed I was weak. Believed that I could be erased and forgotten. That my throne could be stolen and no one would care." A man near the front shifted uncomfortably. Several others wouldn't meet Robert's eyes. "Aldrich is in the dungeons," Robert said flatly. "Along with 14 others who participated in the plot to assassinate me. Their trials will be held at week's end. Justice will be served." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some approving, some nervous. "But today," Robert said, his voice softening just slightly, "I'm not here to speak of betrayal. I'm here to introduce you to the woman who reminded me why this throne matters. Why this kingdom matters." He turned to Eva, held out his hand. She took it, her heart hammering. "This is Eva Ashenfang," Robert announced. "My wife. My Luna. Your queen." The hall erupted. Some nobles bowed immediately, their loyalty already sworn. Others stood frozen, shock written across their faces. And a few, a small but vocal few, looked outraged. "Your Majesty," a woman in emerald silk called out, her voice sharp. With respect, the court had no knowledge of this marriage. "How can we be certain it's legitimate?" Robert's eyes went cold. "Are you questioning my word, Lady Petra?" "I'm questioning the circumstances," Petra replied, lifting her chin. "You disappeared for 5 years. You return with a common girl and announce she's our queen. Forgive me if I require more than your word." "Then you'll have it." Robert pulled a rolled parchment from his coat and held it aloft. The marriage was performed by Father Benedict of Thornhollow, witnessed and recorded as required by law. The contract is sealed and binding. He tossed the parchment to a man in scholarly robes near the front. "Verify it, Chamberlain." The man unrolled the document, studied it for a long moment, then looked up. "It's legitimate, Your Majesty. Signed, witnessed, and properly sealed." "There," Robert said, his voice dangerous. "Does anyone else wish to question my choice?" The hall was silent. Then an older man stepped forward from the crowd. He wore gray robes embroidered with silver wolves, and when he moved, others gave him space. Authority radiated from him like heat from a forge. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice gravelly. "I am Councillor Bremen, head of the Northern Alliance. We pledged our loyalty to you 5 years ago, and that loyalty remains." He turned to Eva, and his expression softened. "My lady, you enter a world that is not kind. A world full of politics and danger, and people who will smile while planning your downfall." He paused. "But if you have even half the strength your husband claims you possess, you'll survive. And perhaps even change things." He bowed, not the shallow courtesy bow the others had given, but a full, respectful bow that acknowledged her as his equal. Eva's throat tightened. "Thank you, Counselor." Bremen straightened, a small smile playing at his lips. "Welcome home, my queen." And like a dam breaking, the rest of the court followed suit. Bows and curtsies rippled through the hall like waves. Murmurs of "my queen" and "my lady" filled the air. Even Lady Petra dipped into a curtsy, though her expression remained sour. Robert's hand tightened on Eva's. "You did well," he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. "I didn't do anything. You stood beside me. That's everything." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Meetings with advisors whose names Eva immediately forgot. Tours of the palace that left her head spinning. Introductions to servants, guards, nobles, all of whom bowed and smiled and watched her with calculating eyes. By evening, Eva's feet ached, her head throbbed, and she wanted nothing more than to collapse in the ridiculously comfortable bed and never move again. But Robert had other plans. "Come with me," he said, appearing at her chamber door just as Marta was helping her out of the formal gown. "There's something I want to show you." Eva wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell him she was exhausted, overwhelmed, still angry about the lies. But the look on his face stopped her. Hope. Tentative and fragile, like he was offering her something precious and terrified she'd reject it. "Give me a moment to change," she said. Marta produced a simpler dress, still far finer than anything Eva had owned in Thornhollow, but at least she could move in it, and within minutes, Eva was following Robert through the palace corridors. He led her away from the main halls, down narrower passages where the stone walls were bare and the torches fewer, up a spiral staircase that made her legs burn, through a door that protested with rusty hinges, and onto the roof. Eva gasped. The city spread out below them like a tapestry of light and shadow. Thousands of windows glowed in the gathering dusk. The streets were ribbons of gold where lanterns hung. And beyond the city walls, the forest stretched dark and endless, with mountains rising in the distance like sleeping giants. But it was the sky that stole her breath. Stars. Thousands of them, appearing one by one as the light faded. More stars than she'd ever seen in Thornhollow, where the forest canopy blocked out half the sky. You talked about the stars, Robert said softly, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. That first night at the well. You said your father used to tell you stories about them. Eva nodded, not trusting her voice. What was his favorite story? She swallowed hard. The Wolf Queen. He said that long ago, before kingdoms or borders, there was a woman who could speak to wolves, who ran with them under the full moon and understood their language. The gods loved her so much they placed her in the sky so she could watch over the pack forever. There. Robert pointed at a cluster of stars above the northern horizon. Do you see those 7 stars forming a crown? Eva followed his finger. Yes, that's her. The Wolf Queen. We call her constellation the Luna's crown. His voice was reverent. Every Alpha King takes his vows beneath those stars. Every Luna is crowned under them. Eva looked at him. Is that why you brought me here? Partly. Robert turned to face her fully. But mostly I brought you here because this is where I come when the weight of the crown feels too heavy. When I need to remember that I'm more than a title. That there's a world beyond politics and betrayal and duty. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, featherlight. You reminded me of that, he said quietly. In Thornhollow, when I was just Robert and you were just Eva. No titles. No expectations. Just 2 people who talked about stars and caught fish and laughed at crooked signs. Eva's breath caught. I miss that. The simplicity. So do I. Can we ever have it back? Robert's smile was sad. I don't know. But we can try. He dropped his hand, putting careful space between them again, and Eva felt the absence like a physical ache. I meant what I said earlier, Robert continued. About wanting nothing from you except what you're willing to give. That includes this. He gestured between them. Us. Whatever we are or might become. I won't pressure you. Won't expect you to love me just because we're married. What if I already do? The words escaped before Eva could stop them. Robert went very still. What? I don't know if it's love, Eva admitted, her cheeks burning. I don't know if I even know what love is supposed to feel like. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel less invisible. Like I matter. Like my thoughts and opinions and fears are worth something. She forced herself to meet his eyes. And I know that even though you lied to me, even though I'm angry and confused and terrified, I still want to be near you. I still think about the way you held my hand in Thornhollow. The way you looked at me like I was something precious. The way you smell like pine and rain and... She cut herself off, mortified. But Robert was staring at her like she'd just given him the world. Eva, he breathed. I'm not saying I forgive you, she said quickly. Or that everything is fine. But I'm saying I want to try. To see if we can be more than just a political arrangement. To see if what we had in Thornhollow was real. Robert closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. It was real. Every moment. Every word. I swear to you, the only lie I told was about who I was. Everything else, everything I felt, everything I said, that was all truth. Then prove it, Eva whispered. How? Kiss me. Not as a king. Not as part of some royal duty. Kiss me like you did in Thornhollow, when we were just Robert and Eva and nothing else mattered. Robert's thumb traced her cheekbone, and his voice came out rough. I never kissed you in Thornhollow. I know. So kiss me now. For a heartbeat, Robert didn't move. He just looked at her, memorizing her face in the starlight, as if this moment was something sacred he needed to preserve. Then he leaned in. His lips brushed hers softly at first, tentative, asking permission. Eva made a small sound and pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt. The kiss deepened, gentle but insistent, full of all the things they hadn't said and all the promises they hadn't made. Robert's arms came around her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Eva felt the strength in his body, the careful restraint in the way he held her, like she was precious and powerful all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Robert rested his forehead against hers. "I'm still angry with you," Eva whispered. "I know. And I'm still terrified." "I know that too. But I'm not leaving." Robert's arms tightened around her. "Thank the gods." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other under the luna's crown, while the city sparkled below and the stars watched above. And for the first time since leaving Thorn Hollow, Eva thought maybe, just maybe, she could learn to call this place home. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of lessons Eva never knew she needed. How to sit at formal dinners without slouching. How to address nobles by their proper titles. How to eat with utensils she'd never seen before and couldn't imagine practical uses for. How to curtsy versus bow, and to whom, and when. How to smile politely while people insulted her with compliments. "Your dress is lovely, my lady," Lady Petra had said at breakfast, her smile sharp as a blade. So refreshingly simple. Almost rustic. Eva had wanted to dump her tea in the woman's lap. Instead, she'd smiled back and said, "Thank you. I find that true elegance doesn't require excessive decoration." Marta had squeezed her hand under the table in approval. But it was the evenings Eva lived for. Every night, after the endless meetings and lessons and performances, Robert would appear at her door. Sometimes he'd take her to the roof again to watch the stars. Sometimes they'd walk through the palace gardens, where night-blooming flowers scented the air like perfume. Sometimes they'd just sit by the fire in her chambers and talk, about everything and nothing, about his childhood and hers, about dreams they'd had and futures they'd imagined. And every night, he'd kiss her goodnight. Soft kisses that made her toes curl. Deep kisses that left her breathless. Kisses that promised more, but never demanded it, always leaving her wanting and safe all at once. "You're courting me," Eva realized on the third night, laughing against his mouth. "Is it working?" Robert murmured, his lips trailing down her jaw to the sensitive spot below her ear that made her shiver. "Maybe. Only maybe?" He pulled back, mock-wounded. "I'll have to try harder." "Please don't. The nobles already think I've bewitched you." "You have," Robert said seriously. "Completely and irreversibly." Heat bloomed in Eva's chest. "You're impossible. And you're beautiful." He traced the curve of her cheek with his thumb. "Especially when you're flustered." "I'm not," but her blush betrayed her. Robert grinned, that rare, boyish smile she'd first fallen for in Thorn Hollow. "Yes, you are." Then his expression sobered. "The trials start tomorrow," he said quietly. "Aldrich and the others will be brought before the council." Eva's good mood evaporated. "Will I have to be there?" "No. But you can be if you want. As Luna, you have the right to witness all judicial proceedings." "Do you want me there?" Robert was quiet for a moment. "I want you wherever you feel comfortable. This is your home now, Eva. Your court. You get to decide how much or how little you participate." "That's not an answer." "No," he admitted. "It's not." Eva studied his face, the tension around his eyes, the tightness in his jaw. "You're nervous about tomorrow. Aldrich is my uncle. My father's brother. I grew up calling him Uncle Aldi, learning to hunt at his side, listening to his stories." Robert's voice went rough. "And then he tried to have me killed. So yes, I'm nervous about looking him in the eye and condemning him to death." Death. Treason carries only one sentence. Robert's expression was bleak. "I don't have a choice." Eva reached up, cupped his face in her hands the way he so often did to her. "Then I'll be there." "You shouldn't face this alone." "Eva, I'm your Luna," she said firmly. "For better or worse, remember? That includes the hard parts." Something fierce and grateful blazed in Robert's eyes. He caught her hands, pressed kisses to both palms. "What did I do to deserve you? You asked me to marry you when everyone said you shouldn't. Best decision I ever made." The throne room was packed the next morning. Eva sat in a smaller throne that had been placed beside Robert's, newly commissioned, Marta had explained, specifically for the Luna. The silver cushions were soft, but Eva perched on the edge, her spine rigid with tension. Below the dais, the entire court had assembled. Nobles in their finest clothes, as if this were a performance rather than a trial. Guards lined the walls, hands on sword hilts. And at the center of it all, chained and kneeling on the cold stone floor, were 15 people. 14 strangers. And one man Eva recognized from a portrait in the palace gallery. Aldrich Ashenfang looked nothing like his portrait. Where the painting had shown a distinguished gentleman with silver hair and kind eyes, the man before her was gaunt and hollow-eyed, his fine clothes rumpled, his hands trembling in their shackles. He looked like he'd been broken a long time ago. Aldrich Ashenfang, Robert said, his voice ringing through the chamber. Cold. Authoritative. Nothing like the gentleman who'd kissed her last night. You stand accused of high treason. Of conspiracy to commit regicide. Of the murder of 7 royal guards. How do you plead? Aldrich raised his head slowly. And when he spoke, his voice was steady. Guilty, Your Majesty. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Robert's expression didn't change. You confess. I confess. Aldrich's gaze swept over the assembled court, then returned to Robert. I conspired to take your throne. I hired assassins to kill you. I orchestrated a coup that cost good men their lives. I am guilty of every charge you've leveled against me. Why? The word came out harsh, almost desperate. You were my father's brother. My family. Why would you? Because you were weak, Aldrich interrupted. Your father knew it. The council knew it. Everyone knew it except you. Robert went very still. Dangerously still. My father trained me for 24 years to be king. Your father trained you to be kind, Aldrich spat. To show mercy. To rule with compassion instead of strength. And kindness gets you killed in this world. So you tried to kill me first. I tried to save the kingdom from a ruler who would have destroyed it with gentleness. Aldrich's chains rattled as he leaned forward. You want to know the truth, nephew? Your father was a fool. He ruled with his heart instead of his head, and it made us weak. Made our enemies bold. I loved my brother, but I loved this kingdom more. Robert's hands clenched on the arms of his throne. You murdered 7 innocent men. I eliminated obstacles. You betrayed your own blood. I did what was necessary. Aldrich's voice rose. And I'd do it again. Because you are not fit to rule. You're too soft. Too forgiving. Too. Enough. The word cracked like thunder. Robert stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, not the gentle strength Eva had seen in Thornhollow, but something older and more primal. Alpha power. You think kindness is weakness, Robert said, his voice low and deadly. You think mercy is foolishness. You think ruling with compassion makes me unfit. He descended the dais steps slowly, each footfall echoing. But you're wrong. Strength isn't beating people into submission. It's giving them a reason to follow you by choice. Mercy isn't foolishness. It's understanding that every act of cruelty you commit is a seed you plant, and eventually, those seeds grow into the blade that kills you. He stopped in front of Aldrich, towering over his kneeling uncle. You taught me to hunt, uncle. You taught me to track and fight and survive. But my father taught me why those skills matter. Not to dominate, but to protect. Not to inspire fear, but to earn loyalty. Robert's expression was terrible in its stillness. I am not my father. And I am not you. I am exactly what this kingdom needs, someone strong enough to show mercy, and wise enough to know when mercy is no longer possible. He turned to face the court. Aldrich Ashenfang, you are guilty of high treason. The sentence is death, to be carried out at dawn 3 days hence. May the gods have mercy on your soul, because I cannot. Aldrich laughed, a bitter, broken sound. There's the king I knew was hiding in there. Cold and ruthless after all. No, Robert said quietly. Just finished with you. He gestured to the guards. Take them away. All of them. As the prisoners were led out, Aldrich caught sight of Eva for the first time. His eyes widened, then narrowed with something like understanding. "The village girl," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "So that's what changed. You found something worth fighting for." Robert moved to block Aldrich's view of Eva, his stance protective. "You don't get to look at her. You don't get to speak about her. You've lost that right along with every other privilege your bloodline granted you." Aldrich smiled grimly. "She'll be your downfall, nephew. Love always is. Or my salvation," Robert countered. "Guess we'll never know which." The guards dragged Aldrich away, his laughter echoing down the corridor. That evening, Robert didn't come to Eva's chambers. She waited until the candles burned low, until Marta came to help her prepare for bed, until the palace settled into nighttime quiet. But he never appeared. Finally, Eva couldn't stand it anymore. She wrapped a robe around her nightgown and went looking. She found him in what Marta had called the king's study, a masculine room full of dark wood and leather and maps. He sat slumped in a chair by the fire, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring into the flames. "You're drinking," Eva observed. Robert looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Then guilt. "I didn't want you to see me like this." "Like what?" "Human. Weak." He took a long drink. Aldrich was right about one thing. "I am too soft. Too forgiving. You literally just sentenced him to death. After 5 years of hiding. 5 years of running when I should have fought." His laugh was bitter. "Some king." Eva crossed the room and took the glass from his hand, setting it aside. Then she did something she'd never dared before. She climbed into his lap, straddling his thighs, forcing him to look at her. Robert's hands came up instinctively to steady her, gripping her hips. "Eva, you listen to me," she said fiercely. "You're not weak. You're not a coward. You survived an assassination attempt and spent 5 years building the evidence you needed to bring your enemies to justice. That's not weakness. That's strategy. I ran away. You stayed alive. There's a difference." She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "And you know what I think? I think Aldrich is wrong about everything. Kindness isn't weakness. It's the hardest kind of strength there is. Anyone can rule with fear. It takes a special kind of courage to rule with love." Robert's eyes were suspiciously bright. "How are you this wise?" "I'm not. I just know you." Eva leaned closer, her forehead resting against his. "The real you. Not the king. Not the alpha. Just Robert. And he's the best man I've ever known." Robert made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and pulled her tight against him, burying his face in her neck. His shoulders shook once, twice, and Eva realized he was crying. She held him, running her fingers through his hair, murmuring wordless comfort the way her mother used to when Eva was small and scared. "I'm sorry," Robert said eventually, his voice muffled against her skin. "I shouldn't. You have nothing to apologize for." Eva pulled back just enough to kiss his forehead, his cheeks, the bridge of his nose. "You're allowed to feel things. Even kings get to be sad sometimes. Not in front of their court." "I'm not your court. I'm your wife." Robert's hands tightened on her hips. "My Luna." "That too." He pulled back to look at her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her chest ache. "Stay with me tonight?" Not like that. Just stay. I don't want to be alone." Eva smiled softly. "I'll stay." She shifted off his lap and held out her hand. Robert took it, let her lead him from the study, through connecting corridors to his private chambers, rooms she'd never seen before. They were surprisingly simple. Yes, the bed was massive and the furniture expensive, but there were personal touches everywhere. Books stacked haphazardly on tables. A worn leather jacket slung over a chair. A collection of smooth river stones on the windowsill that looked like they'd been gathered over years. "The maid despairs of me," Robert said, following her gaze. "Says I'm too messy for a king." "I like it," Eva said honestly. "It looks lived in." She climbed into the massive bed, pulling back the covers in invitation. Robert hesitated only a moment before joining her, stretching out on his back with a sigh. Eva curled against his side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heartbeat. "Thank you," Robert murmured, his arm coming around her shoulders. "For earlier. For defending me." "Always," Eva promised. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. Eva? I love you. Her breath caught. He'd said it before, but hearing it now in the darkness, with his arms around her and his heart beating beneath her ear, it felt different. More real. I love you too, she whispered. Robert's arms tightened around her. And they fell asleep like that, tangled together, finding comfort in each other's warmth as the palace settled into night and the stars kept watch above. The execution was scheduled for dawn. Eva woke before the sun, still wrapped in Robert's arms. He was already awake, staring at the ceiling with hollow eyes. You didn't sleep, she murmured. Couldn't. His voice was rough. Keep thinking about when I was 8 and Aldrich taught me to ride. He was patient. Kind. Everything an uncle should be. He made his choices, Robert. You're not responsible for them. I know. Doesn't make it easier. Eva propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. In the pre-dawn light filtering through the windows, he looked younger. More vulnerable. Do you want me there? She asked. At the execution? Robert's eyes met hers. It's going to be brutal. Public executions always are. I don't want you to see that side of this world if you don't have to. But do you want me there? He was quiet for a long moment. Yes. Selfishly, yes. Because facing this alone feels impossible. Then I'll be there. She kissed his forehead. You're not alone anymore, remember? Something fierce and grateful blazed in his expression. He pulled her down, kissed her deeply, desperately, like she was an anchor in a storm. Thank you, he breathed against her lips. Always. The execution square was packed by the time they arrived. Thousands of people crammed into the cobblestone plaza, all craning for a better view of the platform that had been erected overnight. The scaffold stood 10 feet high, with 15 nooses swaying in the morning breeze like grotesque ornaments. Eva's stomach turned. Robert's hand found hers, squeezed tight. You can still leave. I'm staying. They climbed the steps to the royal viewing platform, where seats had been arranged for the king, his Luna, and the High Council. Below, the crowd roared, some calling for justice, others for mercy, most just eager for the spectacle. It made Eva sick. They treat it like entertainment, she whispered to Robert. Death always draws a crowd. His expression was grim. It's the one thing that reminds people they're alive. The prisoners were led out one by one. 14 strangers Eva didn't know, their faces ranging from defiant to terrified. And finally, Aldrich. He walked with his head high, his chains clanking, his expression serene, as if he'd made peace with his fate. When he reached the scaffold, he turned to face Robert directly. Any last words? Robert called out, his voice carrying across the square. Aldrich smiled. Just one piece of advice, nephew. Love is the greatest weakness a king can have. Guard your heart, or it'll destroy you. Or save me, Robert replied steadily. We've had this conversation. So we have. Aldrich's gaze slid to Eva. Take care of him, village girl. He'll need someone with spine when the real threats come. Before Eva could respond, before she could ask what he meant, the executioner placed the noose around Aldrich's neck. May the gods have mercy, the executioner began. They won't, Aldrich interrupted calmly. But that's all right. I don't deserve it. The executioner pulled the lever. Eva looked away, but she couldn't block out the sound. The thud of the trapdoor. The sudden silence that fell over the crowd. The collective exhale, like the city itself had been holding its breath. It's done, Robert said quietly beside her. But his hand trembled in hers. 1 week after the executions, the palace buzzed with preparation. The official coronation ceremony had been announced, not just for Robert, who'd never been properly crowned after his father's death, but for Eva as well. A dual coronation, unprecedented in Northern history. The court is split, Councillor Bremen explained during a private meeting. Half believe you should have married nobility. That the Luna should come from an established house with political connections. And the other half? Robert asked, his arm draped casually around Eva's shoulders as they sat together on the study sofa. Bremen's eyes twinkled. The other half remember that you spent 5 years gathering evidence and building alliances while living as a common man. They think your choice of a common bride proves you understand your people in ways previous kings never did. So I'm either a brilliant political statement or a foolish romantic, Eva said dryly. Welcome to court politics, my lady. Bremen smiled. For what it's worth, I'm in the second camp. A king who understands poverty and hardship will rule more justly than one who's only known wealth. After Bremen left, Robert pulled Eva closer. Are you ready for this? The coronation will be public. Every noble house in the Northern Territories will attend. It'll make the trial look small. I'm terrified, Eva admitted. Good. That means you understand what's at stake. He pressed a kiss to her temple. But you'll be magnificent. You always are. I don't feel magnificent. I feel like a fraud. You saved my life, Robert said simply. Not with a sword or strategy, but by reminding me why I wanted to be king in the first place. That's worth more than any political alliance. Eva turned to look at him. You really believe that? I really do. The coronation took place on the autumn equinox, when day and night were perfectly balanced. Symbolic, the priest said. A new beginning for the kingdom. Eva stood in her chambers while Marta and 3 other handmaidens prepared her. The gown was exquisite, deep midnight blue silk embroidered with silver wolves and stars. The neckline was modest but elegant, the sleeves long and fitted. A silver belt cinched her waist, making her look taller, more regal. The Luna's crown, Marta said reverently, carrying over a circlet of silver so delicate it looked like frost-given form. Forged 500 years ago for the first Luna. Every queen since has worn it. No pressure, Eva muttered. Marta smiled. You'll do wonderfully, my lady. His Majesty chose well. When Eva finally saw herself in the full-length mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like she belonged here. Like she'd been born to this. Even though she hadn't. The ceremony took place in the Grand Cathedral, a massive stone structure that could hold 3,000 people. Every seat was filled. Nobles in their finest clothes. Common folk crammed into the upper galleries. Guards lining every wall. And at the far end of the impossibly long aisle, standing before the altar with the high priest beside him, was Robert. He wore black and silver, formal regalia that made him look every inch the Alpha King. But when Eva appeared at the cathedral entrance, his entire face transformed. Love. Pure and unfiltered, written across every feature. Eva's hands shook as she began the long walk toward him. Every eye in the cathedral tracked her movement. She heard whispers, gasps, murmurs of approval and disapproval. But she kept her eyes on Robert, used him as her anchor, and forced one foot in front of the other. When she finally reached the altar, Robert took her hand and mouthed, "You're beautiful." The high priest cleared his throat. "We're gathered here in the sight of gods and men to crown our rightful king and his chosen Luna." The ceremony was long, full of ancient words and symbolic gestures Eva had practiced a dozen times. Robert knelt first, and the priest placed the heavy gold crown on his head, a fierce thing of sharp angles and wolf motifs. "Robert Ashenfang, do you swear to rule with justice and mercy? To protect the weak and guide the strong? To place the kingdom's needs above your own?" "I swear it," Robert said, his voice ringing through the cathedral. "Then rise, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. May your reign bring prosperity and peace." Robert stood, the crown glinting in the candlelight, and Eva's breath caught. He looked like a legend come to life. Then it was her turn. Eva knelt on the velvet cushion, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The priest lifted the Luna's crown. "Eva Ashenfang, do you swear to stand beside your king? To guide with wisdom and comfort with compassion? To be a voice for those who cannot speak?" Eva's throat tightened. A voice for those who cannot speak. Like the girl she'd been in Thornhollow, invisible and ignored. "I swear it," she said clearly. The crown settled on her head, light as air but heavy with meaning. "Then rise, Luna of the Northern Territories. May your reign bring hope and healing." Eva stood, and the cathedral erupted. Not with polite applause, but with thunderous cheering. The common folk in the gallery stomped and whistled. Even some of the nobles looked moved, dabbing at their eyes. Robert took her hand, raised it high, and the cheering intensified. "Your people," he murmured, "just for her." "Our people," Eva corrected. His smile could have lit the entire cathedral. The celebration feast lasted until midnight. Course after course of food Eva couldn't identify. Wine that flowed like water. Musicians playing while nobles danced in complicated patterns that made her head spin. Eva sat beside Robert at the high table, trying to look graceful while desperately wishing she could kick off the beautiful but agonizing shoes Marta had strapped to her feet. "You're fidgeting," Robert observed, amusement coloring his voice. "My feet hurt. Want to escape? Can we? We're the king and queen. We can do whatever we want." He stood, offered his hand. "Dance with me first, though. Give them something to talk about." Eva let him lead her to the dance floor. She'd practiced the basic steps with Marta, but actually performing them in front of hundreds of people was different. "I'm going to step on your feet," she warned. "I'll survive." The musicians struck up a waltz, and Robert swept her into the pattern. He was a good dancer, no surprise there, and he held her close enough that she could feel the heat of his body through the layers of silk and wool. "You did well today," he murmured as they turned. "Better than well. You were perfect." "I was terrified." "I know. That's what made it brave." Eva looked up at him. "When did you become such a romantic?" "The moment I saw you at that well." His hand tightened on her waist. "You've ruined me for anyone else, you know. If you ever leave, I'll spend the rest of my life comparing every woman to you and finding them lacking. Good thing I'm not leaving then. Promise?" "Promise." They danced until the song ended, then another began, and another. Other couples joined them on the floor, but Eva barely noticed. She was too focused on Robert, on the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room, on the warmth of his hands, on the scent of pine and rain that clung to him. "People are staring," she whispered eventually. "Let them." He dipped her, making her gasp and laugh. "Let them see that their king is hopelessly, completely, embarrassingly in love with his queen." "Robert." "What?" "It's true." He pulled her upright, closer than propriety allowed. "I love you, Eva. And I don't care who knows it." Heat flooded Eva's face. "You're impossible. And you're mine." He spun her once more, then led her off the dance floor, through a side door, into the cool night air of the palace gardens. They were finally alone. Robert backed her against a stone wall, his hands bracketing her head, his body warm against hers. "I've been wanting to do this all night," he murmured, then kissed her. Not the gentle kisses from before. This was desperate, hungry, full of all the restraint he'd been showing for weeks. His hands tangled in her hair, careful of the crown, and Eva made a sound she'd never heard herself make before. "Robert," she gasped when he moved to her neck, finding that spot below her ear that made her knees weak. "Someone might see." "Don't care." His teeth grazed her pulse point, and she shuddered. "You're my wife. My Luna. My queen. If I want to kiss you in my own garden, I will." Possessive, Eva managed. "Absolutely." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes dark with desire. "Tell me to stop and I will." "But gods, Eva, I don't want to." Neither did she. "Don't stop," she whispered. Robert groaned and kissed her again, deeper this time, and Eva forgot about the feast, the nobles, the crown on her head. There was only this, his mouth on hers, his hands gentle but insistent, the way he made her feel precious and desired all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Robert rested his forehead against hers. "Come to my chambers tonight," he said quietly. "Not just to sleep. Stay with me. Really stay." Eva's heart raced. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He cupped her face. "But only if you want to. Only if you're ready." Eva thought about the girl she'd been in Thornhollow. Invisible. Mocked. Told she was running out of time to matter. And then she thought about the woman she'd become. A Luna. A queen. Someone who'd chosen love over safety and found both. "I'm ready," she said. Robert's smile was slow and devastating. "Then let's get through the rest of this feast as quickly as possible." 3 weeks after the coronation, Robert made an announcement at the morning council meeting. "We're going on a tour of the outer territories," he said, spreading a map across the table. "Starting with the villages on the forest edge. I want our people to see their new Luna. To know that their queen understands them because she comes from them." Councillor Bremen nodded approvingly. A wise decision, Your Majesty. The common folk need to see that you haven't forgotten them. But Eva saw the map. Saw the route Robert had traced with his finger. It passed directly through Thornhollow. Her stomach twisted. Robert. We'll discuss it later, he said quietly, meeting her eyes with an expression that was both apologetic and determined. After the meeting, Eva cornered him in his study. You're taking me back to Thornhollow. It wasn't a question. Yes. Robert set down the papers he'd been reviewing. You don't have to face them if you don't want to. We can pass through quickly, stay just long enough to… No. Eva's voice came out stronger than she expected. If we're going, we do it properly. I want them to see. I want them to know. Robert studied her carefully. This isn't about revenge, is it? No. Eva thought about the girl who'd left Thornhollow with a battered suitcase and a wanderer's hand to hold. About the mockery, the laughter, the certainty in everyone's eyes that she'd doomed herself. This is about closure. About showing them that choosing love wasn't foolish. That I didn't settle. That the man they called worthless was worth everything. A slow smile spread across Robert's face. My fierce Luna. Your Luna, Eva agreed. Who happens to be very good at holding grudges. I've noticed. He pulled her close. We'll make it memorable. I promise. The royal procession left the capital on a crisp autumn morning. 20 guards in black armor. 5 carriages carrying servants and supplies. Banners bearing the wolf's head crown snapping in the breeze. And at the front, riding matching white horses, were the Alpha King and his Luna. Eva had never ridden a horse in her life. Just hold on, Robert had coached her that morning, helping her into the side saddle. Let her do the work. And try not to look terrified. I am terrified. Then fake it. You're the queen. Queens don't fall off horses. Queens absolutely fall off horses. Not my queen. But somehow, miraculously, Eva stayed mounted. The mare was gentle, well-trained, and seemed to understand that her rider was a novice. And having Robert beside her, steady and confident and ready to catch her if she slipped, made it bearable. They traveled for 3 days, stopping in small villages where people lined the roads to see their king and queen. Everywhere they went, the common folk stared at Eva with something like wonder. She's one of us, Eva heard a woman whisper in the second village. Look at her dress, another said. Fine as any nobles, but she still smiles at us like we matter. The king chose well, an old man declared. A queen who remembers what it's like to be hungry will never let her people starve. Each comment settled something in Eva's chest. A sense of purpose she hadn't known she needed. This was why she was here. Not because of some grand political strategy, but because she could be a bridge between the throne and the people who actually lived under its rule. On the afternoon of the 4th day, they crested a hill, and Thornhollow came into view. Eva's breath caught. The village looked smaller than she remembered. The buildings more worn. The forest edged closer and darker. Had it always been this bleak, or had the capital's grandeur changed her perspective? You all right? Robert asked quietly. I don't know. Eva's hands tightened on the reins. What if they don't believe it? What if they think I'm pretending? What if… Eva. Robert reached over, squeezed her hand. Look at me. She did. You are the Luna of the Northern Territories. You wear the crown. You sit beside me. You rule with compassion and wisdom and strength. That's not pretend. That's who you are. His voice softened. And if they can't see it, that's their failure, not yours. Eva took a shaky breath. I'm scared. I know. But I'm right here. I won't let them hurt you. You can't control what they say. No. But I can control what happens after. His expression went hard. Anyone who disrespects you disrespects their queen. That's treason. And I've recently demonstrated what I do with traitors. Despite everything, Eva laughed. You're not going to execute my entire village. Wanna bet? Robert. Fine. But I'll think very stern thoughts at them. The procession descended the hill, and word spread through Thornhollow like wildfire. The king is coming. The Alpha King himself. By the time they reached the village square, it seemed every resident had turned out. They lined the streets, gawking at the guards, the banners, the carriages. Whispering and pointing and craning for a better view. And then they saw Eva. The whispers died. Silence fell like a hammer. Eva sat straighter in her saddle, the luna's crown catching the afternoon light, and met the eyes of people who'd mocked her, who'd laughed at her, who'd called her foolish and desperate and doomed. Her brother Osric stood near the well, his mouth hanging open. His wife Greta clutched his arm, her face pale. Aunt Meredith had actually dropped her market basket, vegetables rolling into the dirt. And there, at the front of the crowd, was the tanner Gregor who'd announced his daughter would trip over herself before settling for a drifter like Robert. His daughter wasn't there, but Gregor looked like he might vomit. Robert dismounted first, then turned to help Eva down. His hands were gentle on her waist, steadying her, and when her feet touched the ground, he didn't let go immediately. "Ready?" he murmured. Eva nodded. Together, they walked to the center of the square. The captain of the guard stepped forward, his voice booming, "Make way for His Majesty, Robert Ashenfang, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and Her Majesty, Eva Ashenfang, Luna and Queen." The crowd dropped to their knees like wheat before a scythe. Every single person, nobles and commoners, family and strangers, bowing before the woman they'd called a last-chance bride. Eva's throat tightened. Robert stepped forward, his voice carrying across the square. "I come before you not as a stranger, but as someone who walked your streets, who slept in your tavern, who chopped wood for your widows and mended your fences." Gasps rippled through the crowd. People were starting to remember, starting to recognize him. "Some of you showed me kindness," Robert continued. "Others showed me contempt. You judged me by my clothes, my lack of coin, my apparent worthlessness. You laughed at the woman who chose me. You mocked her for throwing her life away on a beggar." His expression went cold. "That beggar was your king. And the woman you ridiculed is your queen." Aunt Meredith made a sound like a wounded animal. Osric looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him. Gregor had gone gray. "I remember every face that laughed," Robert said quietly. "Every voice that mocked. Every person who made my wife cry with their cruelty. And I want you to understand something very clearly." He turned to Eva, held out his hand. She took it, let him pull her forward to stand beside him. "This woman, your queen, showed me mercy when I had nothing to offer her but myself. She chose love over security, kindness over cruelty. She saw me as a person when you saw me as trash." His voice rose. "And she is worth 100 of you." Eva's eyes burned. "Your Majesty," a shaking voice called out. Eva looked up to see Osric, still kneeling, his face ashen. We didn't know. If we had known. If you had known, you would have bowed and scraped and fallen over yourselves to curry favor," Robert interrupted coldly. "But my wife chose me when you thought I was nothing. That's the difference between her and you. She has character. You have opportunism." Osric flinched like he'd been slapped. Greta was crying openly now. "My lady, please. We're family." "Family," Eva repeated, her voice steady despite the emotion churning in her chest. "Family who called me desperate, who laughed at my choice, who made me feel worthless for choosing love." She looked at each of them in turn, Osric, Greta, Aunt Meredith, all the neighbors who'd whispered and pointed and judged. "I forgive you," she said quietly. The crowd stirred, surprised. "Not because you deserve it," Eva continued, "but because carrying your cruelty around like a stone in my chest serves no purpose. You were wrong about me, wrong about him, and now you have to live with that knowledge." She stepped forward, addressing the entire village now. "I came from here. I know what it's like to scrub floors and swallow pride and feel invisible. And now I'm your queen. And I will use that position to help people like I used to be, people who are overlooked, underestimated, dismissed as worthless." Her voice grew stronger. "Because everyone has worth. Even when the world tells them they don't. Even when their own families doubt them. Everyone deserves to be seen." The silence that followed was profound. Then, slowly, Councillor Bremen, who'd accompanied the procession, began to clap. The sound echoed across the square, and others joined in. Hesitant at first, then growing. The guards, the servants, even some of the villagers who'd shown Robert kindness during his stay. Not everyone. Plenty of people still looked ashamed, uncomfortable, unwilling to celebrate the woman they'd mocked. But enough. Robert turned to Eva, and the look in his eyes was everything. Pride. Love. My Luna, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My queen. The woman I chose above all others, and the best decision I ever made. Then, in front of the entire village, in front of her family and her former neighbors and everyone who doubted them, Robert cupped Eva's face and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. A declaration. A promise written in the shape of his mouth on hers. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, the crowd was silent again. Robert turned back to face them, his arm around Eva's waist. Let this be a lesson, he said. Value is not determined by wealth or status or bloodline. It's determined by character. And the woman you dismissed as worthless has more character in her smallest finger than most people possess in their entire bodies. He paused. Let that sink in. We'll stay the night at the tavern. Tomorrow, we continue our tour. But tonight, anyone who wishes to apologize to their queen may approach. She'll grant you an audience because she's gracious. But understand this, I will be there. And I do not forget cruelty as easily as she forgives it. The threat hung in the air like smoke. The tavern had been cleared out, transformed into makeshift royal chambers. Not comfortable by palace standards, but better than Eva had ever experienced when she'd lived here. All evening, people came. Osric arrived first, hat in hands, eyes red. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you. Thought you'd starve. I never meant. I know, Eva said gently. You did what you thought was right. But you didn't trust me to know my own heart. I'm sorry, he said again, voice breaking. I forgive you. But earn it. Be better. Teach your children that people's worth isn't measured in coin. He nodded, tears streaming, and left. Greta came next, then Aunt Meredith, then the tavern keeper who'd let Robert stay but charged him double because he looked poor. One by one, they apologized, made excuses, begged forgiveness. Eva gave it freely, but she didn't forget. The last visitor surprised her. Gregor the tanner shuffled in, looking old and beaten. My lady, I have no excuse. I was cruel. My daughter, his voice cracked. She married a merchant's son like I wanted. Rich man. Important family. And he beats her. Eva's breath caught. She can't leave, Gregor continued, tears streaming. The marriage contract, her dowry, she's trapped. And I did that. I pushed her toward wealth instead of character, and now she suffers. He felt his knees. Please. I beg you. Use your position. Help her. I know I don't deserve your mercy, but she does. She's innocent in all this. Eva looked at Robert. He nodded once, understanding in his eyes. What's your daughter's name? Eva asked. Clara. Clara Thornwell now. I'll send someone to investigate. If what you say is true, we'll extract her from the marriage. Find her somewhere safe. Eva's voice was firm. No one deserves to be trapped with someone who hurts them. Gregor sobbed. Thank you. Thank you, my lady. I don't deserve. No, you don't, Eva agreed. But Clara does. And this isn't for you. It's for her. After Gregor left, Eva sagged against Robert. That was harder than I expected, she admitted. You were magnificent. He kissed her temple. Fierce and merciful all at once. I just want to go home. The capital? Yes. Eva smiled tiredly. Strange, isn't it? A few weeks ago, I'd never seen a palace. Now it's home. Not strange at all. Robert pulled her close. Home isn't a place. It's wherever we are together. They left Thornhollow at dawn, just as they'd arrived weeks ago, except everything was different. The village turned out again, but this time, they bowed with respect instead of mockery. They called out blessings instead of laughter. They watched Eva ride away with something like pride instead of pity. As they crested the hill and Thornhollow disappeared behind them, Eva felt something settle in her chest. Peace. No regrets? Robert asked. None. Eva smiled at him, the man who'd been mocked alongside her and turned out to be a king. Well, maybe one small regret. What's that? I wish I could have seen Aunt Meredith's face when she realized the worthless drifter was actually royalty. I bet she choked on her tongue. Robert laughed, loud and genuine. probably still is choking on it. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the procession following behind, the road ahead stretching toward home. Eva? Robert said eventually. Thank you. For what? For choosing me when I had nothing to offer you but myself. For seeing me when I was invisible. For reminding me why I wanted to be king in the first place. He reached over, tangled his fingers with hers. For being exactly who you are. Eva squeezed his hand. Thank you for asking a last-chance bride to take a chance on you. Best gamble I ever made. Same. They rode toward the capital, toward their future, toward a life neither of them could have imagined weeks ago. The woman who'd been mocked for choosing love had become a queen. The man who'd been dismissed as worthless had reclaimed his throne. And together, they would rule with the kind of strength that only comes from knowing what it means to be overlooked and choosing to see everyone anyway. The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.